Hello, it's Mark Holmes, the editorial director of Via Satellite, and we have another of our Thursday morning conversations. And we have someone a little different today, someone who's not, I guess, directly part of the satellite industry, but who's going to give us a really interesting perspective on space-based healthcare in the future. But before we do that, Beth Healey, it's lovely to have a conversation with you. It was great doing an interview with you recently for Via Satellite. I mean, as a doctor, as someone who's, how has life been over the last 6 months for you?
It's been a bit of a crazy time, yeah. Really different way of working for a lot of people. We've seen a lot of changes take place in the workplace, and yeah, it's been pretty exhausting. And I guess we're all sort of getting geared up as well to a potential second wave. So we'll see what happens.
And just sort of tell us a little bit about, I guess, those sort of preparations. I mean, what are sort of the lessons maybe have you sort of learned from the first wave as we go into winter?
Oh wow! Well, I mean, there's so many, but I suppose for us, particularly as a department, there's been a huge emphasis put on sort of well-being of staff and making sure sort of that people aren't getting too fatigued, and also a lot of training taking place as well to make sure that we're all as prepared as possible, in case something does happen.
Okay. I mean, part of these conversations, we do like to have a little bit of, talk about some, I guess, some more fun things. So we talk about movies, music, and TV dramas. I know you probably don't have huge amounts of sort of spare time, but what have you been watching? Any favorite movies or dramas you've been watching when you have time?
Oh, well, I mean, I like Downton Abbey, so that's kind of my favourite sort of go-to when I want to chill out. But yeah, I mean, I love dramas and series and things, and I guess that's why I ended up as a doctor as well, just watching, ER when I was younger. Although there's no sort of Dr. K batch, unfortunately, in my department, so it's a bit disappointing to what I grew up believing that being a doctor would be like. But I think, yeah.
Who's your favourite character in Downton Abbey, or who's?
Oh, I like them all, but I guess Carsten, the butler, it's got to be my favourite, I think, as with many people.
Did you like the movie? I only watched the movie for the first time a couple of months ago, and I'm sort of curious. I watched all of Downton Abbey as well. I think most people in the UK.
Yeah, no, I'm a big fan, and I like the movie as well. It's sort of enough years past all of the series and things to make it nice to have it come back, really. So yeah.
I must admit, I was a little bit sad with the dowager, the Maggie Smith character at the end. I thought, because you think of Downton as like a real feel-good movie, and it was I guess obviously sad that I don't know if they'll do a second movie, but that obviously that they I guess wrote Maggie Smith out of it at the end.
I know, yeah, it won't be the same, definitely. Yeah, that's the best.
And we apologise to anyone from the satellite community who's now going to watch Downton Abbey if we've spoilt the ending of that movie slightly for you. But no, what sort of music do you like, Beth?
I like all sorts. I guess like my favourite types, like I like electro swing, but I don't know. I'm not too fussy. I like cheesy music as well, and yeah, a bit of electro. It depends what mood I'm in, really. Exercising, I like something a bit more with a beat. But then I like all the classics as well. I love a bit of Queen or like all the Beatles.
Queen seems to be coming up a lot in our Thursday morning conversations. Obviously, they've got a new album out, I think, for the first time in ages this week. So
yeah, well, and also Brian May is big into space and stuff, and I got to meet him at one of the Space Rocks concerts that you stood at. So he's like I'm a big fan of his now.
Very cool, very cool.
Yeah, PhD, I think, in astrophysics.
Yeah, he's definitely got a background in space, and it's sort of funny. You get to sort of learn, some of the celebrities musicians, people like that who've got an interest in space. Let's talk about space-based healthcare. I mean, that's the reason you and I, did an interview a few months ago, and obviously we're at an unprecedented era globally. What difference do you think that satellites space can actually make in healthcare going forward. I mean, it's such an interesting topic, and as a doctor, someone who's on the front line, who's been on the front line, during a pandemic, how do you see this sort of question?
Well, I think it's hugely enabling, especially with kind of sort of with infectious diseases where you need to have sort of that barrier between patients and healthcare professionals. So I think we've seen what a lot of technology that I think would have come into place in clinical practice over the next few years come in sort of overnight, as it were. So it was kind of interesting to see how quickly all these things could be implemented in a time of need as well, because I've been part of a Space and Global Health working group between sort of, United Nations, ESA, and World Health Organization, which has for a long time been talking about a lot of the technologies and sort of space-based technologies that we could potentially implement into a clinical setting, which sort of could be useful, but it always felt like it was something that was a long way off, especially in terms of things like telemedicine. And you sort of go into work in the NHS and you've still got your like little bleeper, and you're struggling to sort of fax through ECGs and various things, and and the sort of idea of suddenly being able to do telemedicine just seemed very, very distant. But I guess like how it is with wars and other sort of big events and things, it does mean that sort of countries pull together really to sort of get this technology out clinically a lot quicker, and that's really what we've seen during this pandemic, which is really positive in many ways and quite exciting to see.
Can you give us any sort of practical, I mean, you said you're part of a working group and you talked about having an old-fashioned bleeper maybe. Is there any sort of examples where even in the last 6 months, something that's happened over a satellite link, or that just hadn't happened, say like pre-March, pre-February of this year?
Oh, well, like everything. Yeah, I mean, there's so much stuff. So I think the biggest thing that I really noticed sort of at the beginning of the pandemic was teaching, really, because there was a huge, COVID for all of us was a brand new disease, and every day there was sort of daily updates on how to manage it, but not just that sort of so there were the updates with COVID, but then there's also a lot of move of workforce as well within the hospital. So lots of for example, nurses that previously hadn't worked in intensive care were suddenly being asked to work in that environment. I myself changed hospital during the outbreak. And so just doing sort of just general induction training as well was really useful to be able to do on these platforms, because otherwise you just wouldn't have been able to have the same kind of face-to-face meetings because of infection control. So we're able to sort of train a large workforce quite quickly, efficiently, and all the information could be really up to date as well by using these different platforms. And so that was one of the first things that I really saw sort of satellite technology coming into play. And I guess the other big thing as well was right at the beginning, the sort of John Hopkins map showing sort of how the disease was spreading was really useful for us as clinicians, because it was just all happening so quickly. Trying to get that sort of up-to-date real-time information about where the hotspots were and how that was changing was really useful for us to assess the risks of particular patients, as well as sort of the risk of them having contracted COVID based on where they had been. And at that time I was working in Switzerland, so I had lots of people coming in on holidays from different areas, and so I was definitely using that quite early on.
And do you think, I mean, I know that you've spoken on sort of satellite based webinars before and forums. Would you say amongst, say, other doctors who are more in the healthcare, the medical community, there is sort of a growing interest in using a satellite-based platforms and technologies now?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. And I think also because we've seen it now being used in these environments as well, it all suddenly seems more possible, whereas, a few sort of even just a year ago, you'd have these sort of great ideas of how technology could be used. And as I say, then you sort of go in and the reality is just you have to sort of be these quite big clunky systems, and it just didn't even really feel possible to make those big changes, whereas I think we now all feel a lot more enabled to sort of make these big changes to the systems that we're using, and feel like sort of any innovation could actually sort of come through and be a positive thing. That's not to say that there weren't big steps taking place before the outbreak, and a lot of these platforms as well have been built on during the outbreak. So, for example, the Good Sam app is an example of that, and that was developed at Imperial, and it's a really cool app. So it's kind of a little bit like a sort of Uber for cardiac arrest. So if you were to have a cardiac arrest, it can sort of localize you, but it also can localize. Sorry, my phone's sorry. It can localize. Sorry. It can.
So, yeah, localized. Tell us about the link for that, because probably a lot of people that are watching this conversation won't know the link between this app and Satellite. So, maybe you tell us about why you're highlighting this app.
Yeah, so it basically like geolocalizes the patient, but also it geolocalizes like the closest responder to you, and also where the closest defibrillator device is as well, which is really useful because it means that you're able to get sort of medical care a lot more quickly, which is especially important in the case of a cardiac arrest, is to get those sort of initial shocks in very quickly. But this was an app which has then been developed with lots of different areas, and also developed in the case of COVID. It became the app which people were using to help volunteer their services and sort of localize people as well. So a lot of these infrastructures which were already being developed were sort of used quite early on within the outbreak as well, and did some quite exciting things.
And do you expect more of those sorts of apps to come along now? Are more being developed? So, I know we spoke, I think, about 3 or 4 months ago, I guess sort of halfway through where we are now in terms of the pandemic. What has anything sort of happened since then that you can talk to us about, particularly obviously when we look at the links between space and healthcare?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, even within the ITU setting that I'm working in, we've now got sort of loads of tablets which we have sort of in with the patients and sort of outside of the unit with sort of, so and that wasn't something that we even had physically at the beginning of the outbreak. So, just by having sort of the physical technology to be able to utilize things like the satellite apps as well is really enabling. So, and those have been used as well to sort of reduce the amount of PPE, for example, that we need to use, because you're able to just take the iPad in to see the patient rather than necessarily physically everyone having to go in themselves.
Okay. I mean, would you say that even over the last few months that Satellite has in this, I guess, this fight against this coronavirus, do you think, how much of a difference has satellite technology made overall, do you think?
Oh, I think it's remarkable, and also, I mean, I'm just talking from sort of the more ITU point of view, but of course, most of the other sort of specialities now are all relying on satellite communication through telemedicine for the mainstay of their clinics, and that does also continue. So, all sort of general practice care, a lot of follow-up clinics now are being done online, and because of that, it keeps people safe. It stops. The risk of people having to come in to have that advice into hospital and sort of risk potentially catching coronavirus. And equally, it reduces the risk of people being too frightened to come in and to get that advice, and in turn delaying their treatment as well. So it's sort of it's allowed us to continue those treatments, which hopefully in the long term will help improve patient outcome.
And what is your, Beth, what is your sort of vision for the future of this? I mean, I know that you've been on working groups, you've talked about it with me and others, and but when we look at this, as this pandemic carries on and hopefully at some point falls away over the next couple of years, what is sort of the future for sort of telemedicine as you see it, and how obviously the space industry can enable that in the future?
Oh, well, I really think that we are just looking at the beginning, really, and I think over the next year or years, I really think that this is something that is going to be sort of the mainstay of how we provide medical care. I don't see us sort of going back now that these systems are in place. A lot of it is a lot more efficient. As I said, it sort of can keep patients safe even outside of times of sort of infectious disease outbreaks. I think it can also be useful for patients that may be more isolated as well, in terms of being able to actually physically get to hospitals and things. And just the efficiency as well is really important for the healthcare systems as well. So I just see, I really feel that in a way, you know, this outbreak and the use of telemedicine and us all sort of having to be forced to kind of change our ways to adopt it initially. I think in some respects, I think it will be, because we've now made that change to have it as part of our sort of work life. I don't see us going back, and I just see us really improving the technology that we have. And I mean, there are lots of things that can be developed, you know. I think we've definitely had our teething problems with all sorts of different systems, and they're by no means perfect. So I think there's lots of scope to really sort of maximise that technology a little bit further for us all to be able to use more efficiently.
Yeah, because I mean, telemedicine itself isn't a new concept. I mean, I remember writing about this years and years ago. But are we really now almost at the start of this telemedicine era properly now? I mean, was it really? I mean, or am I being a bit? Maybe I'm being a bit harsh there, because I know we've talked about it before for years, but it seems like it maybe was going to take something like this for people to really I guess, embrace more the technology side of it when looking at healthcare and medicine.
That's it. I mean, I think it's just not only for people to embrace the change, but also for the infrastructure and the sort of tools for us to be able to really use it have been put in place because of the pandemic. And I think without that having happened, without that catalyst initially, I think we would have seen, you know, as you say, you know, it wasn't that we invented telemedicine because of COVID. It's just really that telemedicine has become part of a normal sort of clinical practitioner's life now, rather than it sort of being sort of a distant thing that we're sort of all chatting about and sort of when will this come into place. And you know, I think that's the big thing, is it's just that actually now we're actually all using it, which is quite exciting.
It is. And what as someone, I mean, I keep saying this, but you're obviously on the front line of things. And I mean, to be honest, via Satellite, we don't interview many doctors. What do you feel that the healthcare community, the medicine community, what do you need from the satellite space industry going forward? How would you like them to enable some of these ambitious plans? I mean, I'm just sort of curious. I mean, we have a big audience of space-based professionals. What would you like from them over the next few years?
I think more of a dialogue between sort of the actual problems that we're facing and how we can address them. Because I think often, you know, sort of I've been to lots of conferences, things like Wired Health, and very, you know, and I often feel that there's a lot of things which are being developed, but without necessarily a good dialogue between sort of doctors and healthcare professionals about actually what's going to be useful. And I think also sometimes I think we forget, like, some of the sort of just more practical limitations with patients and what it's really like to work in those environments. And a lot of technology, I think, is sometimes developed without that being kept in mind. And so sometimes it's not really that sort of practical to use. And I think it's really just about sort of communicating about sort of what we can realistically use as well, and sort of keeping everybody involved. I think that really is key. But I think I really do see a huge scope for all different domains of medicine to really take on this technology, and for us to see some real positive changes as a result of it.
I mean, it's fascinating to hear this, and you know, obviously, you know, it's interesting because we haven't, even at Via Satellite, we've done the odd telemedicine healthcare stories, but it's only this year that we really wanted to do something a little bit bigger. So it's great that hopefully it's going to enable some changes. Are there any other sort of, I mean, I know you spoke about the Good Sam app. Is there maybe one more example that you can give us about, you know, a space-based, it could be an app or something where over the last few months where space technologies have made a difference?
Well, I suppose, I mean, the John Hopkins one would be the next one that that sort of springs to mind. But I guess the other one really is just is Zoom, I suppose, as I just, because I really think this ability for us to be able to teach people and really just disseminate the information that we had really quickly, really early on, was really key in the development of the response that we had. Because, you know, it's a really unusual time to be able to sort of, you know, we were able to Skype with different hospitals around the world with sort of and be learning and being taught by professors which were really sort of top of their field in all different hospitals right at the beginning of the outbreak, you know. So that information wasn't sort of held back, and we were able to learn really quickly about how different hospitals had responded. You know, we sort of were hearing from the Italian intensive care doctors really early on about their experiences, and so I think that really helped to prepare us for what was coming and for what to expect, and I think that was really key in the sort of early days, especially at developing our response. And so it's not always the sort of more complicated technology, or sort of although that's nice as well to have the more specialist stuff, but I think also, like, it shouldn't be underestimated how useful just in those early stages, just that sort of being able to have that sort of international dialogue at a time when it was really hard to do teaching sessions because of the fact that sort of physically you weren't able to be in the same room as different people.
And that was taking place over like a satellite connection.
Yeah, and I mean, it was amazing to see, you know, sort of to be able to speak, you know, to people that had been involved in like the first patients, you know, just a few days afterwards, and quite a scary time when people weren't sure what to expect. It was quite reassuring to kind of speak to people that had been involved in that, and it sort of made you feel like you were sort of part of a big international community, and not just sort of on your own, sort of in your own little department, sort of waiting for it to arrive. So I think that was really useful for everybody, and also sort of mental health services as well. You know, sort of there's been a lot of access for people to be able to sort of get support at what has been a difficult time, I think, for the workforce, because everyone's quite tired, and I think there's been lots of things that people have been able to use as well in that respect.
And I guess my final question on this subject, you spoke about a dialogue and a greater dialogue. Do you feel that, I mean, the healthcare and space satellite communities are obviously very different communities, but would you like to, or do we actually need to see more of these types of collaborations, more opportunities for people like yourself and people within the satellite and space community to get together now? Is there still, would you say there's a big need for that, or do you think the communication channels are pretty good at the moment?
No, I think there's a huge need for it. I think because unless you understand each other's profession, because I mean, I'm sure there's lots of things which satellites do which I have no idea that they can do, and as a sort of satellite producer, you might not necessarily know how that, or that even would be a useful thing to have. And I think it's really important to get that dialogue, to really sort of maximize the technology that we do have available. I remember I went on it was like International Space University, and a lot of it, I learned a lot about sort of satellites and satellite technology, and I think it was really useful to have that insight about the capabilities that we have and what it all is all about, and also even just to get it on people's radar that it's something that's available to us. Because I think, you know, sort of growing up as a doctor and sort of going through medical training, you know, there's no section on innovation and satellite technology and how we can use these extra tools. And so you sort of just concentrate on your day-to-day job and treating the patients. And you might be sort of faced with some sort of process which takes a lot longer than it could do, but you don't really think about trying to change it. Whereas when you do have that opportunity to speak to people, it sort of makes you look at the working in clinical environment from a different perspective, to really look at sort of areas that could be improved through the technology, and to sort of really take that step back to sort of think about how and what we can do.
Absolutely fascinating. I always like to end the Thursday morning conversation with a fun question. I know we've talked about some pretty heavy topics here. You mentioned that you were, I think I actually asked this question last week as well. You mentioned you were a big Queen fan, right? So I will ask you as a fun last question. I'll ask you to name your 3 favorite Queen songs.
Oh God. I like We Will Rock You, of course. Oh, that's a difficult question. I like
care ones. We got We Will Rock You. We Will Rock You. Give me two more.
I like Rocket Ship.
I don't know that one.
That's like Rocket Ship. Sorry, you caught me. And by the one bicycle.
Another one bites the dust.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, Beth, it's been absolutely fascinating. I really appreciate. I mean, we did that interview earlier this year, and every so often you do an interview and it really sticks with you because it was something completely different to a number of other interviews I've done this year. So it was great to talk to somebody about the the potential future for space-based healthcare. So I'd like to sort of, I mean, I know you're on the front line and you're doing some amazing work. So on behalf of all of us at Via Satellite, we wish you all the best to carry on the amazing work that you and others within the healthcare and medical community are doing. It's great to have somebody to come on the record and talk about the possibilities of space-based healthcare. And, we wish you all the best for the months ahead.
Oh, thank you, Matt, and thanks for having me on.
Thank you.
Thank you.